Numbers 33. Make sure to like, share, and follow. These were the journeys of the Israelites who went out from the land of Egypt according to their divisions by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Moses wrote down their movements according to their journeys on the command of Yahweh, and these are the journeys according to their movements. They sent out from Ramses on the first month, on the 15th day of the first month. On the next day after the Passover, the Israelites went out boldly in the sight of all the Egyptians, while the Egyptians were burying all the firstborn among them, whom Yahweh struck. Yahweh also executed punishments among their gods. Then the Israelites set out from Ramses, and all they camped in Succoth. They journeyed from Succoth and camped to Etham, which is on the edge of the desert. When they set out from Etham and returned to Pi-hahiroth, which faced Baal Zephon, and they camped before Migdol, they set out from Pi-hahiroth and went out through the midst of the sea into the desert. And they went for a journey of 3 days into the desert of Etham and camped in Marah. And they set out from Marah and came to Elim, and in Elim there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. They set out from Elim, and they camped at the Red Sea. They set out from the Red Sea and camped at the desert of Sin. They set out from the desert of Sin and camped in Dophkah. They set out from Dophkah and camped in Alush. They set out from Alush and encamped in Rephidim. And it was there that the people had no water to drink. They set out from Rephidim and camped in the desert of Sinai. They set out from the desert of Sinai and camped in Kibroth Hattaavah. They set out from Kibroth Hattaavah and camped at Hezroth. They set out from Hezroth and camped in Rathmah. They set out from Rathmah and camped in Rimmon Perez. They set out from Rimmon Perez and camped in Libnah. They set out from Nimnah and Libnah and camped in Risha. They set out from Risha and camped in Kelietha. They set out from Kelietha and camped in Mount Shafar. They set out from Mount Shafar and camped in Hardish. They set out from Hardish and camped in Mechaloth. They set out from Mechaloth and camped in Tahath. They set out from Tahath and camped in Terah. They set out from Terah and camped in Mithkah. They set out from Mithkah and camped in Harishmonah. They set out from Harishmonah and camped at Marishah. They set out from Marishah and camped in Bajankan. They set out from Benajankan and camped in Hor Haggadad. They set out from Hor Haggadad and camped at Jabbathan. They set out from Jotbathana and camped at Abhorna. They set out from Abhorna and camped in Ezion Geber. They set out from Ezion Geber and camped at the desert of Zin, that is Kadesh. They set out from Kadesh and camped in Mount Hor at the end of the land of Edom. Aaron, the priest, went up to Mount Hor at the command of Yahweh, and he died there in the 40th year after the Israelites had gone out from the land of Egypt, in the 5th month, on the first day of the month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. Now the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who was living in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard of the coming of the Israelites. They set out from Mount Hor and camped at Zalmanah. They set out from Zalmanah and camped at Punon. They set out from Punon and camped at Oboth. They set out from Oboth and camped at Abram, the boundary of Moab. They set out from Ayim and camped at Dibon Gad. They set out from Dibon Gad and camped at Almon Dibilatayim. They set out from Almon Dibilatayim and camped at the mountains of Abram before Nebo. They set out from the mountains of Abram and camped at the desert plateau of Moab by the Jordan across Jericho. They camped by the Jordan from Beth Jeshmoth up from Abel Shittim on the desert plateau of Moab. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses on the desert plateau of Moab by the Jordan across Jericho, saying, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, When you cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, you will drive out the inhabitants of the land from your presence. You will destroy all their idols and all their images of their molten idols, and you will demolish all their high places. You will dispossess the land and live in it, because I have given the land to you to possess it. You will distribute the land by lot according to your clans. To the larger groups you will give larger inheritance, the smaller groups you will give less inheritance. However the lot falls for him, there the lot will be. You will distribute it according to the tribes of your ancestors. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from your presence, then it will happen that whomever you let remain of them will be like irritants in your eyes and like thorns in your sides. They will be your enemies in the land in which you live, and just as I plan to do to them, I will do to you. May God bless you, and may God bless the reading of his word.